When did a feeling of, we need to get out of here immediately, save you? I was getting a beer with a friend, and he brought along his friend. When we left, I felt very drunk, despite only having 2 drinks. They wanted me to come to their hotel as they were getting ready to go to a concert that night, but I made the excuse that I needed to get home because I think I left my oven on. My beer was 100% tampered with. My vision felt like I was in a tunnel. I got home in an Uber and immediately threw up and continued to do so for the rest of the night. Dude, if you're not feeling well at any point, freaking go home. Story 2. I made a somewhat late night trip to a convenience store that I knew carried wine. I used to work really odd hours, and sometimes late at night I'd finish my work and want to have a few drinks. As I was getting back in my truck, this young girl asked if I could give her a ride a few blocks back to her home. It was probably a bad idea to judge a book by its cover, but she was pretty young and dressed decently. Didn't act too weird or anything, so I figured okay. Well, I'm heading back and we get into a pretty rough part of town and she says turn left up here. Very dark street. Whatever. I stop and she says she really appreciated the ride and wanted to do something for me. She asked if she could help me out a little bit and I decline and start getting sketched out. Like she needs to get out now. She gets out and closes the door as I drive away. 2 men dressed in dark clothing were just stepping towards the street and stared at me as I drove past. Pretty sure that would have ended with a gun in my face. That's what you get for being nice sometimes. Story 3. I mean, it's all speculation since we didn't actually end up getting kidnapped, but when I was 19 and traveling solo in Europe, I met this Australian girl in Spain who was also around 18, and we went to Italy together. We are both short, petite girls, and were very clearly in need of a place to stay. We missed our first ferry out of Barcelona, so we had to take the next one. When we arrived in Italy, our train was hours late, and we didn't get into Rome until around 1 or 2 a.m. We navigated the sketchy streets by the Termini train station and finally found our hostel. The check-in lobby was a small, dingy room that appeared to be a closet. The man working reception looked us up and down and told us there was no room for us anywhere since we were late, but suggested we stay in their sister hotel. Desperate, we agreed. He took us downstairs back to the alleyway where we were greeted by a large man in dirty clothing. They spoke to each other in a language other than English or Italian and led us outside. We walked down a couple alleyways until we got to an unmarked door on the side of a building. One of the men made a phone call, again speaking in a different language. We found it odd since everyone could speak English, but they chose to speak in a language we didn't understand. A man cracked the door open just enough to poke his head outside, and upon seeing the other men fully opened the door and let us in. We walked down the stairs into the sunken room, which was lit by black lights. At this point, it was me, my friend, and 3 large men. The reception was a dirty room containing a couch with some dirty sheets laid over it. They told us the rooms were in the basement and to follow them. We walked down a set of stairs. 1 man in front followed by my friend, followed by another man behind her, followed by myself, and the last man behind me. We went down 1 flight of stairs to find that there was yet another flight of stairs going down to a closed door. At this point, I lost it, and my friend and I pushed past the men and scrambled back upstairs. The men kept shouting at us that the rooms were downstairs, but the scenario seemed way too wild. We eventually found an Australian couple on the street who brought us to their expensive hotel where we booked a room. The next day we searched the internet for the sister hotel they brought us to. Can't remember the name they gave us. We found the hostel online, but it was very clear that this wasn't where they brought us. The hostel boasted beautiful views of the city, so clearly a few levels above ground, and was immaculate. We were definitely in some weird, blacklit, dirty basement. We thought for sure that we were going to get kidnapped and sold into the trade that night. Ugh, that many creepy men and different doors and hallways and paths and locations, and then they make you walk down several flights of stairs? I mean, the cardio alone is scary enough, but good God, glad you got out of there. Story 4. A friend and I had just seen a midnight movie. It was about 2:30 a.m. when I pulled into a gas station to grab a Yoo-hoo. I grabbed the bottle, turned around, and saw 3 men enter the store together. 1 waited by the doors. 1 stood near the register looking at chips. And the 3rd was crouched down with his back to the employee door so the cashier wouldn't see him through the square window in the door. They all look at me at once and then try to ignore me, acting like they're just casually positioned around the cashier and door. I walk up, put my Yoo-hoo on the counter. The cashier turns the scanner and basically tells me with his eyes, "You do it." I bring myself up, drop money on the counter, and walk as normally as I could past the man by the door and out to my car at what seemed like the furthest pump from the store. I sit down, throw my Yoo-hoo at my buddy, and hit the emergency button in my car that calls 911. I connect with dispatch and report a possible robbery. A mile or two later, I see a cop car flying down the street in the direction we just came. I called non-emergency the next day to ask what happened, and they said the men fled after I left, and the cashier told the police he knew he was about to get robbed too, and to thank me for calling the police. That felt good. What didn't feel good was my buddy, in all his nervousness about what was unfolding as he was listening to me recount everything to dispatch. Thought I just gave him a random Yoo-hoo and chugged that thing down like a starving infant with a bottle. Edit. Lots of people asking what Yoo-hoo is. It's a drink in the US that tastes like watery chocolate milk. But shut up, it's delicious. Also, people asking about what kind of car I had with the emergency button. It was a 2002 Chevy. The service is called OnStar and came/comes standard on tons of GM cars. I currently drive a 2020 Subaru and it has the same thing, only it's called Starlink. Story 5. I was about 11 or 12 years old at a neighbor's house. The sun had already set. It wasn't completely dark yet, but it was close and there was less light by the second. We were sitting on the lawn because we loved watching the sky turn from day to night, just talking and giggling and carrying on as little girls do. A truck drove up our street, slower than usual, but not suspiciously slow. Still, I felt my guts sink in for some reason. I didn't understand. A couple minutes later, it passed by again, and then again after another few minutes, though not quite as slow this time. I was 100% positive it was the same truck, so I watched it drive away and noticed it started slowing down. I told her to get up, and when the truck made another U-turn and started heading towards us again, I told her to run and hide. I don't know if she realized what she was hiding from, but we ended up splitting in two directions. She dove behind a bush, and I crouched behind an old car parked in their driveway. We could see each other, and I had a clear shot to the door if I needed to dart in to get a parent, but we heard the truck roll up and stop in front of her house. Someone got out of the truck and started calling for us. I honestly don't remember what they were asking though. We just kept our eyes locked and tried to stay as still and quiet as possible. We probably should have screamed, but I think we were both too scared. The person eventually got in their car and took off. We stayed hidden for what felt like forever, eyes locked, until finally we felt safe enough to run inside. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't notice something and we booked it, or if that person was actually dangerous or not. But I'm glad that I'll never find out. Story 6. Not my feeling, but whatever. It was at a goose fair in Nottingham in the early 2000s. I was there taking pictures for my art course, and my BF at the time fancied himself as a bit of a hardman. Liked to make out that he was trained or whatever. Anyway, after about 20 minutes he made me leave. Said that crap was about to go down. Huge eye roll. Whatever, dude. Okay, we'll leave. I see in the news the next day that a 14-year-old girl was shot dead there not long after we left. I don't know what kind of training he had, like the fact that she had to eye roll and kind of, write it off, but clearly, whatever his intel was, it was good. Yay, that sucks. Story 7. I was at a house party in high school and things were getting very rowdy. Tons of people just trashing the place, and I just had a bad feeling. Told my friends we should leave, but none of them would listen. I remember going out to my car, and as soon as I got in, the cops pulled up. I ducked down and waited for them to get up to the front door and just drove off without them even noticing. Several of my friends spent the night in jail or hiding in the woods that night. I slept comfortable in my bed. Story 8. We were hiking and geocaching up in northern Michigan, where it's pretty rednecky in spots. We were at a designated trail with a small parking lot off of some weird side road, but we decided to check it out anyway. About 5 minutes into the trail, we noticed a game camera, but there was no ID on it. Game cameras on public land need to have ID info, and we thought that was really strange. We kept walking a bit, but I just didn't feel right about the camera or walking on this trail. So we turned around and went back to the truck instead of walking the last mile of the trail. When we got back to the truck, this beater pulls up with a couple in it. The guy was just a regular redneck, but the girl in his passenger seat 100% had the nods and was struggling to keep her head up. He looked surprised when we walked out of the trail, and they sat in the lot for a second and then left. Pretty sure they weren't looking to go for a hike. My guess is that was their camera and they get the notifications when people are on the trail so they can break into their cars. It happened to us on a family trip in Kentucky years ago, so maybe I'm just a little suspicious. But we decided no more backwoods hidden nature trails for us. This is all, very off-putting, but I like the idea of someone just saying they're pretty regular redneck. How does someone look regularly rednecky? Story 9. A couple years ago, I was walking home from the bar at 1 a.m. I'm a young woman in her 20s, so this was instantly stupid. But I wanted to save money avoiding an Uber, and also drunk, so I wasn't thinking straight. I'm walking down a main but dark street, and then a pickup truck driving by slows down next to me. Two men look at me, and the passenger asks, "Hey, you need a ride somewhere?" I lie and say, "No thanks," because I'm expecting one in a moment. They said all right and drove off. I watched them drive down the street, and then a ways down, I saw their brake lights light up. There was no stop sign or stoplight, so I just assumed the worst and thought, I've got to get out of here. I ran into a tiny parking lot to my right and hid behind an outdoor vending machine. Moments later, the two men pulled into the lot and circled it, clearly looking for me. When they couldn't find me, they drove away. I waited a few moments until I decided to call an Uber. Yeah, definitely not the brightest choice there. That just goes to show the power of alcohol, okay? And even as an adult man, don't walk home at night, okay? It's a lot of gross, dangerous people. So spend the dimes, get an Uber. Story 10. When I was 17, I used to go jogging early in the mornings. My then BF lived about 7 blocks down the road, so I jogged to his house. Then we'd loop around a park together before heading back to our respective homes. I started noticing a guy sitting in his car in the park, watching us run. After a week of this, I'd see the same guy along my jogging route, close to my house. In addition to him being at the park, he'd sit in his car and watch me run, drive to the park, then watch me some more. My BF thought I was being paranoid about it all. One morning, it was really foggy out. I started to cross the street, and as I was almost across, someone turned their headlights on bright and it blinded me. Instead of going forward, I stopped and started walking backwards, towards my house. As my eyes adjusted, I could see that the man who'd been watching me was standing next to his car with the trunk popped open. I noped out of there and went home. I never jogged there again. I reported it to the police. My BF's stepdad insisted, but they didn't seem to care. 2 years later, a 16-year-old girl was kidnapped, stuffed into a trunk, then driven out to the countryside. She was beaten, essayed, and then left there. By the description of the man in the car, I knew it was done by the same guy who watched me jog. They never caught him. This is all very horrible, and just one of the many reasons I do not exercise. Story 11. Up in the woods about 2 a.m., having a very large bonfire in midwinter. There were probably 7 or 8 feet of snow where it wasn't packed, and my friend and I were the only two sober. After about 45 minutes, we both looked at each other at the same time and went, something is wrong. Neither of us could quite explain it because we hadn't seen anything, but we knew there were animals in the woods. Grizzlies, wolves, and bobcats are all known to be there, but generally leave larger groups and fires alone. We managed to convince the roughly 15 drunk guys to head back to the trucks a mile away, as a group, knowing at least the sober friend had a gun on her and could use it. We got everyone into vehicles and everyone shipped back to town eventually. When the guys who didn't believe us went back out in the morning to check that everything was cleaned up and found the tracks of a pack of wolves that had been circling the clearing. Story 12. This was back in 2019. I was in college and there was a really nice guy in one of my classes. A week or two in, we had to work together on a small project, and I was pretty excited about the opportunity to get to know him. After speaking to him, though, I got a really bad vibe from him, but nothing specific that I could put my finger on. I lost all attraction to him, and I knew that I should keep my distance. He approached me a couple of times after the project, but I made sure to be pretty cool and distant, though still polite. A month or two later, same semester, our professor, Mr. Baldwin, announced that the guy had been arrested for murdering somebody he had been dating. A month or two later, same semester, our professor, Mr. Baldwin, announced that the guy had been arrested for killing a girl he had been dating, another student in our college, and apparently it was an extremely brutal one. He gave us the number of the detective investigating the case in case we had any info to share. Talk about trusting your instincts. I mean, she had nothing to go on. She literally said she couldn't put her finger on it, but just... Story 13. This story is thanks to my mom's intuition. When my brother and I were young, maybe 10 and 7 respectively, our family was spending some time over the summer with my aunt in Central Florida. My mom had taken us for a trip to a super Walmart, and we came out with a shopping cart completely full of stuff for the couple of weeks we were planning to be there. My brother and I were goofing around on our walk back to the van while my mom navigated the cart, when suddenly she said, "Get to the car, now." in a tone of voice that I hadn't quite heard before, which warranted zero argument from us kids. We quickly crossed the concrete median between parking aisles. We were one over, as she unlocked the van for us to get in, and we waited. She caught up for a few seconds later and loaded everything herself and got in. She called our dad, on her Nextel, LOL, immediately as she peeled out and told him that she noticed a particular car with 2 men in it pass by us when we were initially walking towards/into the store, which for some reason gave her very bad vibes. And sure enough, they had waited and began following us down the lot as we exited the store with a giant cart full of stuff and headed to our vehicle. My dad then called the police and the store to let them know. Lo and behold, some days later, 2 guys with that same car had been arrested for attempted mugging at that exact Walmart after multiple calls to the police had been made. Only as an adult did I realize the adrenaline rush my mother had to have experienced in order to physically pick up that shopping cart outright to bring it across the median as quickly as she did, instead of having us walk to the next cart opening in the median or walk all the way to the end of the aisle and come back up with those guys following in their car. Who's to say what would have happened? It was plain daylight and quite busy in the parking lot. But one thing is for sure, mothers don't mess around when their intuition kicks in. Story 14. Decided to have a look at a culvert, covered stream, that I hadn't been down before. We weren't expecting it to be much, so no safety call-out, weather check, or even bother to let anyone know where the entrance is. Get about 750 meters in, and my buddy notices a load of water pouring in up ahead. We look at each other and go, we need to get out now. In under 5 minutes, the water went from ankle deep and manageable to knee deep and almost pushing us over. We reached a section with some steps, a ladder, and a handrail for inspection, and managed to push the lid off with the water getting deeper every minute. If that ladder had been 10 meters further, we might not have made it. If we'd have slipped, dead. When we got out, it was raining gently. We were soaking wet and just looked at each other with that, oh no, look. A bit more above ground exploring and we worked out that the culvert went under a local canal. If we'd have slipped, we'd have ended up in a sump under a canal and likely never made it out. Nobody knew where we were, what was happening, or how to find us. In all likelihood, the only time they'd know where we died is when our corpses got spat out into the nearby river. A combination of stupidity and stupid good luck, I guess. Story 15. Not a get out of here, but a can't leave this like this moment. My GF and I had just picked up a bunch of metal fence posts and stacked them in the back of her car. As we neared being done, I had a flash of panic, realizing that the points were aimed right at us if we got in an accident. So I turned the whole pile to be cockeyed so it wouldn't be dead on. On the way home, we hit construction. We stopped at the giant flashing traffic light. The guy behind us didn't. We got rear-ended by an SUV doing 60 plus. I instantly had the same flash of panic and looked over at my GF. She was fine. I look down. I'm fine. Look in the back. The fence posts are firmly wedged into the sides of the car after being slammed forward by the rear end crumpling. Story 16. Took my friend out for a drink. First time she had been out since having her daughter 12 weeks earlier. Had a round, then I went to the restroom. Came back to find her having shots at a table with this random dude. Random dude looked at me and I felt flayed alive. Nothing in his eyes but malice. I grabbed my friend's hand and said loudly, "We are leaving now." We left immediately. I went back the next day to pay the tab we walked out on, and the bartender told me that same man was arrested for attacking a woman outside of the bar. Story 17. I was walking home from 6th form one day and saw a car following me along the street. I was about 17. Edit. Misremembered my age. Got a really bad feeling, so I hopped on the next bus with a plan to change directions and head home at the bus depot down the road. On the bus, I got a text from a guy who'd stalked me for years on and off, with a picture of my school taken just then and the names and addresses of 2 of my friends. I freaked. Finally told my parents what was happening. Reported it to the police. He'd driven over 100 miles to try and grab me and my friend and had just missed us because I hopped on the bus and she had gone home early. He got 2.5 years in prison, suspended with orders not to contact any of the girls involved, immediately broke that order and got another 5 years on top. I'm really glad I got on that bus. And people crap on public transportation. Sometimes it's the difference between living and dying. But seriously, how freaky is this guy? He stalked me for years on and off? God. Story 18. Me and some friends were in downtown Vancouver watching Game 7. Stanley Cup Finals, at a pub. Vancouver lost and things on the street got a bit rowdy. My friend wanted to stay and wait for things to calm down, but I just had a bad feeling and said we should hop on the next bus to Kitsilano. On the way over the bridge, I looked back and saw trails of smoke from burning cars coming from the city. A huge riot ensued and it was absolute anarchy all night. They shut down transit shortly after we arrived home. You know, I'm not a big hockey guy, but from this story it sounds like Vancouver is to NHL what Philadelphia is to football. Rowdy fans. Story 19. In high school, at a very shady friend's house, playing cards in the kitchen, one of the house residents comes running through and out the back door holding several illegal items. He's followed by the two roommates also carrying evidence with them, with two cops hot on their heels. The cops chase the roommates out the back door, but one cop stops briefly and tells all of us at the table, "Don't move," before heading out the back door. We're all stunned and look around for a couple seconds before all four of us, without a word being spoken, jump up and run out the front door to a neighbor's where we lay low for like 3 hours until all the noise passes. Story 20. This is one of those strange events and I just put it down to pure luck more than anything else. A few of my friends were leaving a house party one night. This was ages ago when I was in my early 20s, and we were all on the road just having fun. Some of us were inebriated, and some of us were just high on life. I suddenly got an urge to get off the middle of the road. This is a narrowish, one-lane aside road for apparently no reason. I, male, about 220 pounds at 5'8", physically pushed 3 girls off of the road with my arms spread and got to the grass bank on the side of the road. The girls were just about to start complaining about me manhandling them when an idiot teenage driver sped past us in a decked-out cheap sports car. We would have all been mowed down if I didn't push everyone off the road. I wish this story ended there. Not even 5 minutes after he went past us, the driver of that car had swerved to avoid a stray dog on the road and had crashed at around 80 miles an hour into a stone wall. He was apparently 15. The minimum driving age in my country is 18. And was the son of a millionaire. Oh, did he die? Is he okay? Also, the fact that he's the son of a millionaire but he's driving a decked out cheap car sounds like no matter how much money you have, you can have bad taste. But I hope this guy's alive no matter how much of a douche he was at 15. Story 21. I've had a few, but one of the most prevalent that comes to mind is when my older sister and I were kids. I was 8 and she was either 10 or had just turned 11. My dad had just bought a new house that wasn't finished being built yet, so we were staying at my grandpa's house for about a month while our new house was being constructed. My sister and I were playing outside when I saw this weird van pull around the corner. I had been taught about creepy white vans in school, so when I saw it, I paid attention and took in the details. Everything except the windshield was tinted. The driver saw us and started to speed up, and I just told my sister we need to get inside. Right as my sister got up, I looked back at the van and saw a guy open the side sliding door and stare straight at us. We made it inside and locked the door. I peeked through the window and saw the van go slowly by while the guy who opened the door was scanning the yard. I told my mom when she got home about an hour later, and while she said we were right to play it safe, and we always should, I heard her tell my dad later that it was probably nothing and we'd let our imaginations scare us. It was a new place in a neighborhood we weren't comfortable in, so that must be it, according to my mom. The next morning, my grandpa woke me and my sister up and told us that there were cops down the street and that a little girl had been abducted, and the police wanted us to tell them about the van we saw. Security cameras from the couple houses down saw the van too, and my grandpa's next door neighbor also had a security camera that showed the van drive by with the side door open and a guy hanging out and looking in our yard. We moved into our new house before we got an update, but my grandpa went to church with the couple whose daughter had been abducted. The van was found along with the clothes the daughter had been wearing. Her body was found in the wetlands a few months later. If we hadn't trusted my gut, that would have been my sister and I. I'm gonna be honest with you, I hate reading these stories sometimes. Story 22. This story starts like that, but then ends up the opposite. I was on a bus in Romford, UK, and this guy was wasted, talking to everyone and being weird. My mates had a feeling things were getting dangerous, but I didn't feel it. We got off. Here's where the story goes bad, because at 18, I was an idiot. As the bus pulled away, I shouted something dumb at it. Imagine bus wanker, but pre the in-betweeners, so probably not that good. The bus was moving, and suddenly the fire exit door at the back of the bus flew open and the drunk rolled out the door, hit the ground, and started running towards us holding something. I can't remember if it was anything dangerous or if it just looked dangerous. In his hand, all red-faced and angry. We scattered in different directions. I joined a queue to pretend I was going into a club. Some guys went down an alleyway. The drunk went around the street shouting for us, me, to come out and face him, and even approached the queue I was in, searching it like something out of Jurassic Park. I kept quiet, and after what seemed like forever, he turned and walked off down the road towards where the bus had been to see if we were there. All of my friends were understandably furious with me when we caught up at our destination. The two that went down the dead-end alleyway were convinced he was going to unalive them if he found them. Nearly 20 years on, they still rib me about my lack of awareness and how ridiculously dumb I was. We got very lucky. Story 23. My mom's bad feeling might have saved me as an infant. She was walking with me in a stroller down her suburban neighborhood street. She says she started to feel a tingling feeling like she was being watched, so she decided to turn around and head back home. A few streets later, she noticed a car driving slowly behind her. The driver, a man, staring at her and me. She starts walking a bit faster and notices he drives a bit faster to keep up, so she gets really scared. Before she can start running, this is the 90s and she didn't have a cell phone, he rolls down the window and tells her to not run or stop because she's being stalked by a coyote. He saw her safely to our doorstep and then pointed out the coyote, who had followed us half a mile and looked ragged and desperate. It had been slipping from brush to brush looking for an opening. So glad for her intuition and the stranger's help. Story 24. I had passed Amy Bishop, UAH, a biology professor, on the 3rd floor on her way to the faculty meeting where she executed 3 of our professors and attempted to unalive more, as well as herself. She had always seemed weird and gave me chills. I was on my way out of the building, collected my things on the 1st floor from my previous lecture, and drove home to my apartment. I missed several calls on the short drive. Having missed so many, the first I returned was to my mom, who was hysterical. She just kept saying, "You're alive! You're alive!" I was bemused by what she meant. I said, "Should I not be?" And that's when I learned people had been trying to check on my location due to the shooting happening. Edit. I suppose it didn't save me as I was not a faculty member, but it's the first thing that came to mind. It was extremely surreal to get home and realize so many people suspected I was dead. In some ways, this is even scarier, the fact that there was no inkling, no intuition, no feeling that I need to leave or anything. Like, it was just straight luck and chance that you were leaving this place where a lot of horrible things went down. Like, there was no, there was nothing. So just by the grace of God, wow. That's scary. Story 25. Was on my first solo trip to the US when I was around 34. Male and straight. Stayed in a fairly remote Texan campsite and decided to go for a little trek. End up hitting a parking bay. It was about 4 to 5 p.m. and nobody else around. Then some guy in his mid-40s rolls up in a van, starts talking, all seemed normal enough until he asks if I want to go for a ride and to smoke with him. I politely declined. Then he said a bug went down my top. Without realizing, I lifted it and then he commented on having nice chest hair. Said I need to get back to my group and started walking in the opposite direction. Dude then starts reversing and getting a bit aggressive and insisting we go for a ride. I just got straight back to the trail and started running. No idea if he was just some strange friendly guy, a potential thief, or serial killer, or serial SAer, or if I accidentally stumbled into a meetup place for gay men. Glad I didn't stick around to find out anyway. Story 26. When I was 14 or 15, we had a class trip to a well-known beach a couple of states away for a long weekend. One night I was walking with 3 other girls down the main part of the city and a man approached us. Asked if we liked tattoos. We all said yes and we would love to get one, but that we weren't old enough. He said, "Oh, we won't worry about that. My guys do tats for anybody as long as you don't tell on us." And dropped a wink. That's when I started feeling a little leery. He led us down an alley to a little hole-in-the-wall place with a big metal door. When he opened the door, there were about 5 guys in there with no light except for a little red one. My whole being said, "Get the F out now." I screamed, "Run!" and I ran until I got back to the hotel. I'm ashamed I never even looked for the other girls until the next day. A few days later, our class was shown a newspaper article that showed the guy that approached us along with several other men. They were arrested in connection with a trafficking ring. Our 14 to 15-year-old selves were almost trafficked. Yeesh. Story 27. This was my mother's feeling, but it saved our lives. My brother and I were kids and lived just outside of an airbase. We had an appointment to see the on-base doctor, so we were driving on our way there. My mom got a very bad, very sick to her stomach feeling and turned around and left. She said she had a bad dream the night before about us getting shot at the hospital and couldn't get it out of her head. That afternoon, a shooter murdered a bunch of people at that facility we were going to. He was shot dead by the police, I believe. Had we gone in, all three of us would probably be dead. I do not mess around when my mom has had bad dreams anymore. There needs to be more science or something like investigative research on what is a mother's instincts and intuition, because I swear, they are just on the ball, always. Story 28. Last year I went to Miami for my holidays. As I was traveling solo, I used the Couchsurfing app a lot, not only to find hosts, but to meet people to hang out with. This one guy texted wanting to go out for some drinks or go dancing. Since I was on my own, I didn't feel comfortable with going out at night, so I declined. He then continued texting me, offering to go to the beach or to drink something in the afternoon, etc. He had 3 reviews, all from girls, but good comments. Still, I felt that he wanted for something more to happen, which was not what I wanted, so I kept declining his offers. The next day, a girl's profile who I hadn't spoken with before texted me, wanting to meet me to hang out. We chat a bit, and lo and behold, she was with this guy and wanted me to meet with them. I mentioned that I had gone visit some other place a bit far away, so I wasn't gonna make it. She became a bit insistent, telling me this guy has a car so he could come pick me up and so on. I don't know why, but this struck me as a bit weird and just something was telling me not to go. So I just made up some excuse and stopped replying to their messages altogether. A couple of days later, I was talking with my C's host about staying safe while traveling, and I mentioned this to him, saying how uncomfortable it made me feel and yet how rude I still felt for refusing without a solid reason. He said that you can never be too safe and all that better safe than sorry things, and showed me a convo with the girl who had stayed with him before me. She had gone to visit some place with a guy from C's, after which he was supposed to host her. By the end of the day, he took her to a hotel, not his place. She felt weirded out by it, but said nothing. He fixed them some drinks. She only had one and immediately felt tired, so she fell asleep on the couch. She woke up the next morning, naked in bed, feeling drowsy and funny. She said that she wasn't sure if anything had happened because she couldn't remember anything after falling asleep on the couch, but she felt scared and confused, so she got the heck away from there. And after the text she sent him, she included a snap of the guy's profile. It was the same freaking guy that was talking to me before. I never felt more scared, horrified, and yet relieved at the same time. So always go with your intuition, even if you feel silly, rude, or whatever. Too long didn't read. Guy texts me to meet while alone on holidays. Get the weird vibe, so I declined. Later learned that he apparently drugged, and possibly more, another girl. Gross, heartbreaking, scary, sad. I don't like it. I hate it. I hate it so much. And that whole message, that moral is so true. Okay? If you feel rude, you feel silly, you feel like you don't have a good reason to decline, screw that, man. Just say no. Story 29. My dad is a truck driver and has always told me if you were on the interstate near a semi and smell burnt rubber, get away from them because they are about to blow a tire. One day driving to work, I smelled burnt rubber. There was a semi next to me, so I sped up to get ahead of him. Next thing I know, I see a huge crash in my rear view with one car going airborne and flipping. I called the accident into 911 and then watched the news and papers the rest of the day. Thankfully, no fatalities, but it was nasty. The semi blew a tire and the car next to it hit the middle lane, swerved to avoid the tire fragment, and hit the car in the lane, causing it to flip. I would have been right in the middle of it all. I've never heard that information, and I'm going to take that going forward. Oof. Story 30. Somewhat of the opposite, but this was over 15 years ago. I believe 2001 or 2002. My aunt had driven from Atlanta to pick me up for a week-long visit with my cousins. Everything seemed okay, though before we really got on the road, I begged her to stop at this gas station that still had full service. I was only about 13 at the time, but I really wanted to stop. It started to rain really hard while we were there, and I begged her to stay until she could see the road better. It only rained for about 6 to 7 minutes, and we were on our way. About 10 miles up the road, we hit the small town of Abbeville, AL. We saw smoke in the air, which alerted us to slow down. We pulled up to the only major intersection of the town to see it was completely leveled. There were road guards wrapped perfectly around the trees. A long-standing factory was now reduced to rubble. Gas stations were gone, as well as the high school. We called 911. The dispatcher had us sit tight and look for anyone in trouble. She informed us that about 10 minutes prior to our call, a tornado had ran through and torn the town apart. What's scary to me was that there was no alarm or siren. The fact that we had made it there before any EMS always stuck with me because it could have been us too. Story 31. Me and a buddy were hanging out with these two girls we met at a bar. They invite us back to their place where we meet up with a bunch more people. As the night goes on, the party winds down and a few people leave. Then one of the girls starts talking about having an orgy, and all of a sudden the other girl is like, "F yeah, let's do it!" Even in my drunken state, I still had the wherewithal to look around and count. At this point in the night, there's 9 guys, including myself and 2 women. No matter how you divide that up, there's just a bit too much going on here. I decided it was time to go, but my buddy Tim was like, "Nah, man, I'm gonna see how this goes." Tim essentially got excluded from the orgy and got to watch a bunch of dudes messing around while these 2 chicks went back and forth, giving them some relations. That's pretty gross. Yeah, pretty gross. Story 32. My buddy and I snuck out when we were about 14, roughly 10 at night, and we went to check out this little field by my house, all surrounded by trees and had a little creek running through it. I really wanted to see it lit up by nothing but starlight. About a quarter mile away, I got the feeling of imminent dread. "We gotta turn around, dude. I got a bad feeling." "Aw, come on, booby-faced McGee. You're just scared." "Dude, I'm telling you, you can go there, but I'm turning around right now." "All right, fine," he replied. The next day, we found out there was a mountain lion attack that unalived a dude's 2 dogs he was walking. Where was it? About a quarter mile away from the field. When was it? About 10:30, roughly 15 minutes after we bugged out of the area. I have no doubt about my subconscious recognized a big problem that I hadn't consciously noticed. Story 33. Greyhound left me in Santa Ana at 3 a.m., told me to wait 4 hours alone for the next bus. Normally, I'm very selective on when I call Ubers, but for some reason, something told me I needed to leave right away. I find out my hotel is only about 15 minutes away. Wow, a 4-hour wait? So I call an Uber. Uber driver picks me up. I get in the car and tell him something along the lines of, "Man, they wanted me to wait 4 hours and the station is closed. What the heck?" He says he's glad I called him instead of waiting for the next bus. I ask why he says it's a dangerous area, and a few weeks ago another girl decided to wait for the next bus and they SA'd and robbed her. Nobody found her until the station opened up again the next day. Now, I always travel with pepper spray. Story 34. I'm 19, buying weed with a friend. We go to some seedy apartment in the Bronx with a third guy. Third guy wasn't really my friend, kind of like a childhood bully. We get to the building and walk up a few flights and there's 3 guys in the stairwell smoking. These are our dealers. I'm uncomfortable as heck. One of the crackheads tells me to stop being such a little bee. Third guy chimes in and says if I'm going to be a little bee, I can leave. So I leave. Friend comes with me. Days later, we find out the crackheads jumped the third guy, took his wallet and phone, beat him up pretty bad, needed his jaw wired for a few months. I'm a little bee, but I still have my phone and teeth. Ooh, a childhood bully gets the karma he was looking for. I got a feeling that 2 crackheads are about to jump you. Story 35. Not me, but when my mom was a teenager, she started to date this older guy that my grandma had a really bad feeling about. Not just a, "I don't like that boy for you" thing, but a, "stay away from him, something's wrong" feeling. She tells her not to see him, forbids her, prevents her from going over to his house. One night she sneaks out and goes to meet him. He said it was really important that he see her that night. She gets to his house later, swarmed with cops. She found out he was luring young women to his house and unaliving them and had uncovered several remains buried in his yard. I would say she learned her lesson, but my mama's a sweet soul. She's too trusting and gullible because I think she sees the good in people. Luckily, nothing like that has happened again though. Edit. Update for everyone asking. It was in Florida in the late 60s. She said his name was Ozzy, probably a nickname. Doesn't remember much else about it. She was a wild child and dated someone else after. Isn't there like a Canadian Dozer or somebody that also buried people? I can't remember. But either way, good on Grandma. Story 36. A few weeks ago, I was in the metro with my friends and brother. We were going to a park to enjoy the nice weather. We ride the train for one station and the train stops waiting for passengers. 10 seconds later, around 50 or so football supporters who were running from the police enter the train. They are screaming, laughing, mocking, and insulting at someone outside the train. We couldn't see who. The doors were supposed to close, but they didn't. I swear it felt like minutes. But 5 seconds later, the train gets surrounded by police forces, dressed in black armor and armed with batons and tear gas. I'm in horror. I look at my friends. It felt like 1 minute. 1 minute with my mind racing. Many thoughts came to my mind, but it was just a few seconds. I heard a "run" and ran like heck. I didn't look back. So a few hours go by and I look at the news. These cops were pulling football supporters out, throwing them and beating them, seconds after I ran from the train. While I was there, I didn't see anything, but looking at the news, it was a horrific show of fighting and beating. I swear it felt like minutes, but my friends told me it was 10 seconds max. Story 37. On a trip to Berlin, my partner and I were going to get the famous Mustafa's kebab, and on the way we stopped in a small shop to buy some beers. She got a feeling and said, let's leave, so we did. And we weren't 10 steps away when some guy started screaming in the shop and throwing crates of beer bottles at people. Out the door, at shelves of other bottles. It went from 0 to 100 in seconds, so we were lucky. We had delicious kebabs within the hour. It's like she's got a spidey sense for kebabs. Story 38. My first year of college, me and two of my girlfriends got invited backstage before a show with a well-known hip-hop artist. After checking our IDs to make sure we weren't underage, this big friendly guy led us through a labyrinth series of low-ceilinged rooms, ended up in this bunker-like pad with a large leather sectional, coffee table littered in drugs and booze, and 3 or so guys who were not artists, but who seemed nice and funny. While we all chatted, those 3 guys turned into 5, maybe 6, including some starey and silent types. These nice and funny guys kept pressuring us to have the coffee table stuff while we made increasingly smile and high-pitched, "No thank you," but had a little. Suddenly we heard the show starting. Sounding so far away, I said, "Oh, if artist isn't coming backstage before his set, let's go back out so we don't miss it." One of the guys says, "He'll be smoking a joint with us on stage in like 15 minutes. Don't you want to wait to do that with him?" That sounded cool, so we waited. Everyone in the room got increasingly faded, but then the artiste takes a break between sets to smoke a joint, and then takes us to meet him. Unfortunately for us, he's stoned, zoned past the point of speech with fans. He doesn't look at us, just as friends. He turns back to the crowd. His posse moves us to the darkened edge of the stage, just behind the curtains. And I'm feeling dizzier now, feeling confused. Not sure whose hands are on my body now. My friends are on either side of me, and they've each got a guy behind them feeling them up, which is basically the only way I realize that I too have a guy behind me feeling me up. We are ushered backstage again, each of us with at least one guy right at our backs. Things are sort of liquid. I am told that I'm about to get my blank blanked, which felt rude but also like a joke. In hindsight, it probably wasn't. We are being physically led to a room I can't remember seeing before. My friend calls out to me and other friend loudly in a candy-sweet flirtatious tone, "Hey babes, I have an idea and it's gonna sound crazy. But like, what if we, just come here." She yanks us into a hug with her hands sliding down to our butts like we're all about to make out. Then she hisses, completely cogent for a split second, "We have to get the freak out of here right now. Just follow me." And she literally grabbed my friend's hand, who grabbed my hand, and she dragged us, power walking out of this maze-like backstage complex for what felt like 5 minutes without saying a word or making a single wrong turn or meeting a single locked door. Those guys didn't know what happened. We went from catatonia to teleportation. She didn't stop dragging us till we were out of the venue and several blocks away. Ugh, those are always so scary. All these stories where someone gets a little intoxicated or off balance and people try to take advantage of them. Thank the Lord they got out of there. Ugh, I hate it. Hopefully my fake drunk girl voice wasn't too jarring and pulled you out of it. I tried, okay? I tried. Story 39. My then teenage son was hanging out with a bad crowd. The overprivileged, undersupervised. They were up to no good. I suspected and I worried about him. Split custody and different parenting styles made it impossible to completely curtail his association with the group. After most of a year, my son suddenly began pulling back from these guys. No reason given, just cold turkey. A month later, his buddies were arrested for shoplifting. Cops searched the car and found some drugs and automatic weapons. Son saw where this was heading and pulled back in time. He is now a veterinarian and has a wife and a toddler. Oh, and no criminal record. Story 40. Around 1 a.m., smoking weed with 2 friends under a small bridge behind some pillars with no houses around for like 50 meters. Saw a group of guys talking to each other around 30 meters away from us. They split up and one part of the group circled behind us. Told my friend we have to get out of here right away and started running. Looked behind us and saw the 2 groups come racing on their bicycles and stop at the pillars. Can never be sure what would have happened, but doubt they were just gonna ask for a smoke. Story 41. I was working as part of a BA team in a house fire. We were in the converted roof space, which was being used for a bedroom. We were standing in the doorway as the heat from the fire was strong and stopping us from progressing further. As we sat in the doorway, I just came over feeling very unwell. Something wasn't sitting right with me and I was feeling very sick. I said to my partner, "Let's get out of here." As we were going down the stairs, we overheard the evacuation whistle. We dropped everything and bolted out of the house in the time as the roof collapsed in and crushed the first and second floor beneath it, right where we were standing. We got out with such speed that my partner practically threw himself down the stairs face first and had a minor hairline fracture to his elbow. Story 42. I got my wisdom teeth pulled when I was 17. My mother didn't bother to pick me up, so I had to wait for the bus while on painkillers with a mouth full of bloody gauze. Something felt wrong, but my head was fuzzy and I couldn't focus. After about 10 minutes, a group of 3 guys walked up to me and started trying to convince me to leave with them. I couldn't talk and they started grabbing at my arms and pulling me gently towards the shopping mall garage nearby. I think they thought I was drunk and that they could just ease me over out of sight. On a Tuesday, that place was deserted. Up to this point, they had been nice, but insistent. I finally said, "No," and my mouth started gushing blood down my chin and shirt. They got freaked out and let me go, and like a newborn giraffe on ketamine, my butt bolted back to the dentist's office. The nurse called the police for me, and it turns out those guys were suspected in the area for mugging and assaulting drunk women trying to get on the bus depot at the mall. My dentist made it official policy that nobody leaves after anesthesia without an escort after that. My mother was mad the police called her and asked her to pick me up, but that's a story for another day. Okay, look, these stories are all crappy, but don't rob the people that just got their wisdom teeth taken out, okay? For one, they don't have the wisdom, but also, they're so out of it. They're just in pain. Leave them alone, gosh dang it. Story 43. Was at a party a long time ago. There were a bunch of guys from a local gang there, but I'd grown up with many of them, so I didn't think it was a big deal. A guy walks in and the whole sound level of the party went down noticeably. I didn't know the guy or what was going on, but everyone all of a sudden looked super nervous and uncomfortable. The guy who walked in didn't seem to notice or maybe care at all and walked around talking to people who clearly wanted nothing to do with him or whatever situation was brewing. He walked up to me and started talking. I honestly have no memory of what he said, but I do remember looking over at the gang members who were 100% staring right at me. That is when the feeling hit me and I decided to call it a night and left. Woke up the next morning to over a dozen texts about how that guy had apparently snitched on one of the gang members and they nearly killed him after I left. The part that surprised me more is that for some reason those gang members had also severely beat many people who that guy talked to at the party. I was able to reach out to a couple of them to clear the air that I didn't know the guy or what was going on, but I was told I avoided a very rough night of misunderstandings. I saw the guy several years later working at a food truck of sorts and we talked about what happened. Apparently they did like a ghetto crucifixion, nailing his hands and feet to 2x4s and then beat him with random objects they found around the house. Crazy enough, he's relatively fine now as I understand it. Story 44. Very recently, there was a stabbing next to my work, and I was about to head to the store where the stabbing happened. Something told me not to, and we found it was a random stabbing, so it really could have been me. Also, when I went to the Boston Marathon the year the bombing happened, I was on the way towards the finish line. It was the first time we would have watched from there. My mom and I kept getting distracted on the way, and good thing we did because when we were close and could see the tents they set up for emergencies, we saw people freaking out and we realized how lucky we were. Story 45. When I got my first car, I was about 16 and incredibly naive. I went to the local Walmart where a random guy had asked me for a ride. Now, I'm not too keen on giving strangers rides, but he somehow convinced me to take him back to his house, which was on my way to my route anyway. I had this sinking feeling in my gut the entire time he was riding with me. When we finally got to his house, he said, "Don't move. I'll be right back with $40 for the ride." I don't know what made me panic, but I caught a whole wave of "screw this" in my gut. I hopped on a curb in order to get out of the parking lot ASAP, and when I got about 200 or so feet away, I see the dude in my rear view running outside with a gun. I really don't want to know what would have happened, but my butthole puckers every time I think about it. Story 46. 4 of us girls were hanging out on a floating trampoline just offshore on a quiet lake. Late spring/early summer. All of us are from different countries and we're relatively new to the area. I looked up at the sky occasionally, noticing the grayish clouds, then had the sudden feeling that we needed to leave ASAP. The rate of the cloud movement triggered my concerns. I simply thought we'd get all our things soaked and then we'd be freezing on our journey home. Weather here is usually benign, but could be chilly. Anyway, luckily we rushed, just barely flagged down a bus. The driver actually stopped for us. Just barely got into the regional train before a downpour of rain started. Then huge pieces of hail started coming down. For a good 30 minutes or so too. Car windows were broken all around us. Some store and house windows too. Train lines were actually blocked by fallen trees and we got stuck for a while, but at least we were indoors during the storm. Actually had to hitchhike home in the end. We would have been in seriously bad shape and freezing cold if we'd still been sitting outside. If I had to guess, this is Ohio. Story 47. I was in our backyard with my son. He was playing on his little playset that sits under a very large, very old tree. It started to rain slightly and get windy. Being from Seattle, I don't normally care if he plays outside in the rain, but I said to my kid, and this is very out of character for me, "We need to go inside now before the wind takes you away." He came inside. Just as the door closed behind him, a branch snapped off the tree and landed on and crushed the playset he had been standing on 3 minutes earlier. If he'd still been there, it would have fallen on his head. Story 48. 6 years ago, I had a photography internship at a newspaper and borrowed my friend's camera for it. It was during the monsoons, so one night while riding my motorbike, I decided to stop halfway on my way home to see if I could catch some lightning. I stay far from the city and I just happened to stop in the middle of nowhere, with no streetlights or anything. 3 men on a motorbike passed me. Yes, 3 on 1. I don't take notice until I saw them make a U-turn and pull up to where I was. They casually ask me what the time is, which I tell them. This is when I felt something was off, but I keep my cool. They said thanks, took a U-turn, and seemingly went on their way. I hung the camera on my neck, got on my bike, and made my way back home. It didn't take long until I noticed headlights behind me. They circled back again. Dang. They rode right next to me and began trying to kick me off the road. Somehow I was not fearful as I began kicking back as well. Out of nowhere I decided to brake. It was not a great choice as I fell off my bike. 2 of them got off and ran towards me. I was able to get back on before they got to me. One of them grabbed my jacket, but I was already accelerating. The guy on the bike tried to chase me for a bit, but then I pulled a fake out again and braked. He thought I was taking a U-turn, but I didn't. His mates were still running on foot, so he either had to chase me alone or go back for his mates. He chose the latter. I got away. Camera was safe, even though I fell. I'm just baffled as to what kind of bike this guy had, that 3 of them were keeping up with this singular guy. Story 49. My family almost died of a tsunami. I was so young and really loved beach by then. But weirdly on that day, I didn't want to go to beach, despite the weather and my parents asked me to. I begged them to bring me to the city. Our hotel was exactly in front of the beach. My parents wondered what was going on, but they still brought me there. Probably 1 to 5 hours later, there was a huge and sudden tsunami. Totally no warning and all the people screaming, running away from the beach. We still got injured, but pretty much alive. Could not believe what our fate is if we didn't insist we go to the city. Probably our bodies are still missing in the sea. Story 50. In high school, I was attending a show of local punk bands at a local indoor skate park. One of the bands yelled, "Screw Nazis!" And my friend and I immediately got nervous and climbed up on the halfpipe to stay out of the fray we were expecting. Nothing really happened though. About 20 minutes later, still high up, I noticed someone pushing the crowd aggressively. I nudged my buddy. As we're looking around, we see a big group of about 10 skinheads gathered at the entrance. We both just knew it was time to bail. At this time, it was a common skinhead tactic to send in a small guy to disrupt and antagonize until someone boiled over. Once the fight started, this big scary skinheads would join the fray and turn it into a melee. It could be dangerous even if you weren't involved. We grabbed the girls we were with and bolted for a side door. As we were leaving, we heard the music stop and shouts and screams start. We didn't look back. We heard later there were a bunch of hospitalizations, including a stab wound. The skate park got in big trouble because the show was clandestine and there was no security. Total crap show. I don't understand why someone yelling "screw Nazis" was a sign that something bad was about to go down. I feel like everybody would be on board and be like, yeah, I mean, agreed. I don't know why he's saying that, but, good for him. Maybe I just have no survival instincts, because I would have stuck around. Story 51. In my 20s, my brothers and a couple of friends were traveling through Europe. We were on a boat headed for Riga. It was an overnight boat, so we had sleeping accommodations. We were all nerds, so of course, rather than being in the bar or the casino, we're exploring the boat, because we want to see cool boat crap. Problem with exploring a boat late at night in certain parts of the world, however, me and my buddy are walking down the halls on one of the lower levels. A couple of the employees had barked at us in Finnish, I think, to get upstairs. We were too far down, but they were too busy to care that much. After a few turns, I just couldn't help but get the impression we were being followed. Boat had Wi-Fi, surprisingly, so I texted my brothers to meet us at a certain point and told my friend to stop talking. Figured 90% chance if we were being followed, it's because they thought we were American. Meet up with my brothers, quick motion of the eyes and a barely passable sentence in French clues them in. My brothers were fluent in French and Spanish, but I wasn't. One of my brothers spoke German, and so did I. So I continue very loudly in German. Start braggadooshing about football and Bayern with my brother, following along as we meander back upstairs and get our butts back to our cabin. Next morning, everyone getting off of the boat is detained and interviewed by Latvian police. Turns out a Russian gang had been mugging people all night in various parts of the ships, and one of the altercations got violent, with a victim being stabbed. Majority of the victims were Brits and Americans. I'd never really felt a "I need to leave" instinct before, and I still attest that it could have been purely coincidence. But I'm not going to argue against that feeling either. There was no downside to leaving and going to bed, and many possible downsides from lurking around there. Story 52. I can't remember the exact year, but it's gotta be around 05. I was newly married and my husband had an accounting job he had to do in Las Vegas, so his firm put him up in a suite over the holidays, which meant that he had to be in Las Vegas for New Year's. That year, there was an event planned for the Strep weather was going on to be a lot of fireworks for the countdown, kind of like a Las Vegas version of the Times Square on steroids. So we went down there a little before midnight. The show was good, but just before the countdown, they started closing casino floors and locking the doors on the Strip. I guess they didn't want the crowds filing back in. Unfortunately, the street in that area also had a fence, so you had to stay on the sidewalk. I got really claustrophobic, so I tugged on my husband and said, "We gotta get out of here." So we just started making our way through the crowds toward the side street when the countdown happened. We still got stuck, but luckily we're a little more out of the way. When the countdown was over, everyone left at the same time, but there was nowhere to go. People started filing off the pedestrian bridges, shoving and pushing to the point where I was actually lifted off my feet and just shoved by the crowd. The doors to the casino next to us almost broke open with the amount of people being smashed into them. I am grateful we started leaving early because the place I was at, several people crushed and trampled. A guy in a wheelchair was pushed out of it and actually don't know what happened to him because he disappeared into the mass separated from his chair. We finally got pushed toward the street that I was trying to get towards. There was like 6 cops just sitting there doing nothing. From their vantage point, they couldn't see any of the crush, though I have no idea why they couldn't hear the screaming. My husband went and talked to them and they went off running to do crowd control. Later found out several people got injured. Never did find out what happened to that handicapped guy. We were so amped up on adrenaline that we decided to just cut out early and drive home that night. Story 53. When my parents first married, I'm pretty sure my brother was little. My dad was coming back from Hong Kong and they had spoken on a payphone before he was to fly back. He never showed up. And in the news, his flight had crashed in the middle of the ocean. No survivors. My mom was hysterical. A few hours later, my dad comes walking through the door. He said he got to the plane and they were closing the door. He saw it as a sign and felt weird about it and decided to get on the next one. My dad's not that superstitious, so that was a big deal for him. He didn't feel the need to call again because it was only a couple hours. He wasn't aware of the crash. Holy crap. I hope I have some sort of instincts like this that I can trust one day. I mean, I hope I'm never in a position that I need to use them, but if they ever arrived, I hope I don't just write it off. Story 54. I hope that I'm not late, but one day I was taking a hot bath as I love to do when I was laying down in the tub chilling. I started to feel so relaxed that I was slowly getting sleepy. Pretty normal thing in a hot bath, but then I remembered that a water heater fueled by gas installation was acting weird for a couple of days. I got scared because I realized I could get carbon monoxide poisoning. I tried to get off the bathtub, but I just fell down on the floor. I crawled naked out of the bathroom and took a deep breath of the fresh air. The next couple of days I couldn't move out of my bed because of an extreme headache, which, as I read later, was one of the symptoms of monoxide poisoning. If I would have fallen asleep there, I would be dead now. Sorry for my inglando and spelling. Stay safe, boys. Story 55. My car broke down once in a really sketchy area of town at night. I immediately called my boyfriend at the time and insisted on staying on the phone with him until he showed up about 20 minutes later. I watched my rearview mirror for each person who walked past my car to ensure that they walked all the way past my car. I see one guy walk past my car, but never see him go past the rear view mirror. I tell my boyfriend, he's waiting for me to get off the phone. He didn't walk past. My BF doesn't believe me, says that I'm paranoid and freaking out over nothing, blah, blah, blah. Boyfriend shows up. I go get in his car. He pops the hood of mine, and a guy pops his head up over the concrete barrier between the road and the field next to the road to ask if we need any help. When my boyfriend gets in his car, I tell him, that's the guy who didn't walk past my car. He agrees that he was likely waiting for me to get off the phone and that he was super creepy. Anyway, I'm glad that nothing really bad happened. This is another lesson for people adjacent to people with the feelings. Don't call them paranoid. Don't question the feelings, okay? Because just instincts, intuition, even if it's over the top, just follow it, okay? Just don't ever write it off. Story 56. Social worker. I've had a few home visits that have gone as far as getting out of the car and realizing, nope, time to get the frick out of here. Went out once to visit a client that was a single mom with 3 little kids who lived way out in the sticks. Because she'd stopped answering the phone or responding to the other attempts to contact, she had a pretty bad DV history, so I was worried. Got out there and had a feeling something was wrong immediately. Her van was gone, and I knew it had expired tags, plus she had a suspension on her DL. One of the upstairs windows was broken and things were just weird quiet. Got out of the car with my neck hair standing up and had hardly stepped out when my home visit buddy, we don't go out solo for safety reasons, said quietly, "Get back in, man. We need to leave." Once at the end of the driveway, she told me she'd seen a guy that looked like my client's ex ducking back into an outbuilding. I couldn't have seen him from where I was. Had I gone up to the door, he'd have been maybe 10 inches from me. Story 57. My subconscious saved my butt once. Back in the old college days of yore, I was known for disappearing in the middle of nights out. As many young idiots do, I sometimes drank too much and blacked out. When I did, my adult brain said, "Run away." Generally woke up in my own bed with a healthy dose of the fear and possibly missing a shoe. One night this happened, except thing was, I'd only been 2 beers and no drugs. It's hazy, but I remember coming to in a taxi home and vomiting everywhere. Could barely make it to my door. Vomited in the hall and got to bed and passed out. Spoke to roomies the next day and they said I just suddenly became messed up at the start of the night and disappeared. After a housemate told them I'd gotten home so they weren't worried. Found taxi driver's number in my bag, whose taxi I'd vomited all over, and called him to pay the cleaning fine and apologized profusely. And he was incredibly nice. Only charged like 30% of the cleaning fee, as he said he, with vast experience of drunk students, said he knew something wasn't right about my behavior, and said I kept apologizing between pukes and saying, "I'm so sorry, I've only had 2 pints, I swear." Pretty sure someone dosed my drink, and I thank God for my finely honed flight reflex telling me to get the frick out of there. Housemates said some creeper had asked them where I was several times that night. Story 58. Many years ago, when I was much younger, I was driving home from the gym. There was a biker off to the side of the road. His Harley had broken down. He asked if I could give him a ride. He was going not too far from my home, so I said sure. We made small talk. He asked if I was afraid of him. I said no, I'm bigger than you, and I work out. He sized me up and said, yeah, fair enough. We got to where he was going. It was a local clubhouse. Asked me to come in, he'd get me a beer. Least he could do for giving him the ride. I accepted. A lot of people at the house for a weekday. Enjoying the cold drink, an extremely attractive lady sat on the couch next to me, slid right up and got cozy. Very friendly, very chatty. As we're chatting, I asked why there were so many people over. Was it a party or something? She said her husband had just got out of jail. They were celebrating. Apparently, he had beaten a guy really badly for flirting with his wife, who was now snuggled up next to me on the couch. But don't worry, it was all just a silly misunderstanding. It was pointed out the husband was sitting on the couch next to us, staring at me very intently. Right in front of me was the pet pit bull, with its face about a foot away from my crotch, staring at me. I had a sudden moment of clarity as I took this scene in and realized I needed to leave immediately. Excused myself, thanked everyone for the hospitality, and bailed. Realized as I was leaving it was the local clubhouse. Story 59. Not sure if this counts, but my mom saved me from being kidnapped. I was 3 at the time and I was playing in the park with my mom watching me. She looked away for a second and noticed I was gone. She got a bad feeling and ran over the hill behind the park. I was holding a woman's hand while she was leading me to her car. My mom ran up, grabbed me, and took off. Police later pulled the woman's car over to find children's clothes and shoes in her trunk and back seat. Another time was more recently. I was with my mom, grandma, and brother. We were coming home from a vacation when we saw the night sky turn red. We thought, oh, it must be a Beachy Creek fire. We all of a sudden had to stop as there was a line of cars in front of us. We found out that the road was blocked from trees that had fallen. We decided to head back towards where we came from, but that was blocked from 2 more trees. My mom all of a sudden said, "We need to get out of here now." We went up to help clear the 3 trees with a hatchet we had in the back. We managed to clear 2 of the 3 as the third was too big to cut through. We almost got hit by 4 more trees on the way back to our car. As we were leaving, we saw the hillside on fire. The next day, we evacuated and found out that 5 minutes after we left that area we were stopped at, fire burned it all. Story 60. I was attending what I was told a very small get-together, 5 to 6 people, for a friend's college graduation. This was a few months ago in the midst of COVID, and the party was for my wife and my absolute best friends in the world. We had already been quarantined for close to a month and had negative test results a few days prior to attending. When we got there, 20 minutes early mind you, there were already over 10 people. Nobody had masks on or was social distancing. There was open-top food platters everywhere and one guy was barbecuing for the whole party, also with no mask on. When my friend answered the door, thinking quickly, I interrupted my wife and said, "I'm so sorry we have to do this to you, but on our way here I got called into work. They know we have one car and wouldn't have been able to split up." And we handed over her gift and said goodbye. Few days later, found out everyone at that party tested positive. Story 61. Anytime I'm out at night and a guy starts to catcall me. Edit. I should tell a story. I worked in the city, and this day I got off late at night. I usually feel safe and crap, but this day I thought, I should get on the first train that comes, even if it's the one that I need to transfer trains. I usually wait for my train because I hate transferring. I see this group of men near the train stop and they start yelling at me. "Yeah, girl, hurry, you'll miss the train." Or, "You should hang out with us instead of getting on that train." And other crap I'd rather not mention, as I just missed the train and so I had to wait like 10 minutes for another one. And so I walked down and stood at the other end of the stop, so I didn't have to be near that group. And if they got up to me, I could book it to the next stop, which was at the plaza, and even at night more people are there. They ignored me because I don't think they realized I was at the other end. Or they were so out of it because drugs, or they were drunk. And once they realized I was there, they again started saying stuff to me like, "You should come over here and let us warm you up." Or, "It's gonna be a long time till the next train." Which he was wrong because the train was coming, and so this switched to, "We should sit next to you on the train." Or, "Don't leave us. Come play with us." Along with other stuff. They started to get up to walk over to me. The train got there and I ran on. I don't know if they got on the other compartment of the train because you can't walk to one end of the train to the other. It's really just 2 trains and one is pulling the other. I also don't know if they didn't have a ticket to get on or whatever, and so that's why. The trains at night do more ticket crackdowns, but they didn't follow me to my side of the train. Look, nighttime's scary enough as is, even as a dude, but I can't imagine what it's like to be as a woman with guys literally calling out to you. It's like some sort of horror video game that's a bit too real. Stay safe out there, everybody.